Good Monday morning, and thanks for listening to my musing today. This coming Wednesday is St. Patrick's Day, and since, I don't know, I have a slightly red tint to my beard, I figured I would talk about that. I think it's important for us to consider the lives of the saints because saints give us a model for how to live a particular life of faith. While everyone looks to Jesus for the ways that we are compassionate and merciful, we teach and we heal, we can recognize in the lives of the saints just how different lives of faith can be. So with St. Patrick, how do we understand certain parts of our own journey of faith? Why has St. Patrick, among all of the saints, taken the position that he has? These are a couple of the things that I've been wondering about as I am looking for the green in my closet and making little clover-shaped butter cookies. So if you can stick around to listen for more about St. Patrick, I hope you will. So you probably know quite a bit about St. Patrick, at least in lore, already. But one of the things that's important to note is that St. Patrick was indeed a real person, not a Keebler elf and not a leprechaun. So it was somewhere in the 5th century that we get the first writings about Patrick. So maybe he was living in the late 300s or the early to mid 400s whenever we read that he is something like a Roman Briton. By that time, the Roman Empire had advanced all the way into Britain. Hadrian's Wall was built, and perhaps, based on your account, there's the case that Patrick, a Briton, I mean, he wasn't drinking tea with the Queen or anything, but the Briton Patrick somehow was captured and taken to Ireland as a slave. It might be the case that he was in fact fleeing some town council duties there in Britain, but by one way or another, by some of the writings from Patrick, he escaped or was captured and made his way to Ireland, where he served as a shepherd. After a few years of his time there as a slave, as a shepherd in Ireland, he gets on a ship and goes by way to France, where he learns a bit about monasticism. He comes back into Britain and feels a special call to go back to Ireland as a missionary. And so that's what he does. You probably know some of the myths about how Patrick used the shamrock or the 3-leaf clover to teach about the Trinity. 3 leaves, but 1 clover. You've probably heard that he drove all the snakes out of Ireland, with a parenthesis that there were never snakes in Ireland. And maybe you know the story of his walking staff. Once upon a time, he would take his walking staff when he would preach, and the Irish people there were so thick-headed, he had to preach for so long that his walking staff sprouted into a real tree. I don't know if that's a lesson about hard-headed parishioners or about just how long some preachers can preach. These myths and stories that grow up around the saints give us some insight, maybe less into history and more into the value that people put on the lives of people of incredible faith. To be a slave and to return to the land where Patrick was enslaved says something about calling, courage, and forgiveness. To use symbols that are native says something about mission, that when we communicate with people who are culturally different than I am, I have to find ways so that I'm not speaking past the people that I encounter. It was the case that Patrick had to deal often with Druids. There's a lot of speculation about who the Druids were. If you were reading Tolkien a whole lot, maybe you would think the Druids were some kind of magician, a male coven that would meet and do strange things in the woods. It could be the case that Druids was a name given to town council people who would meet and gather to discuss city issues. Maybe what a Druid or Druidism is somewhere in between those things. The point is that Patrick had to face the authorities and powers that were there in Ireland to persuade and convince of the value of Christianity. And so Patrick holds all of these things together. The most Irish of the saints, the patron saint of the nation of Ireland, was himself British. And I find that really interesting. That people can become so enmeshed in the cultures and the peoples that they love and that they serve that now it's almost impossible to think about the nation of Ireland without thinking about St. Patrick. What's more is the way that we celebrate St. Patrick's Day. Every day within the Catholic calendar is a saint's feast day. So why is it that St. Patrick's Day, even for non-Catholics, holds such a special place? One theory is that because St. Patrick's Day comes during Lent, and because it's a feast day where the Lenten restrictions are lifted, it's the one day during Lent when we can drink. Unfortunately, as someone who's been to the St. Patty's Day parade in Boston, that can be overdone just a smidge. But to recognize the value and the pride of Ireland, specifically in the Irish diaspora, where people in Ireland have gone all around the world, especially to the United States, that St. Patrick's Day is a place and a time where Irish heritage can be celebrated. And within Presbyterian churches, Lutheran churches, several churches, and the Catholic Church in America, St. Patty's Day gives Irish people a chance to celebrate, because the Irish do have their own anti-immigrant traditions that we're not so far removed from. Irish need not apply was once upon a time a sign that could be seen in New York on doors that in neighborhoods where people thought the Irish were overrunning the place. But now St. Patty's Day has powerful celebrations in Chicago and Boston and New York and basically everywhere, where the Irish people are able to take pride in being there and being largely accepted in the places where they exist. That gives us a model for how we should consider people who are different, other cultures. If you and I can celebrate St. Patty's Day, if I can celebrate St. Patty's Day with my red beard and loosely Irish heritage, then I should also give space for other people to celebrate with pride whatever their heritage is. It's a wonderful thing when cultures learn to take root in other places, just as the Briton Pat did in Ireland. And what about these symbols? There are no shamrocks or clovers in the Bible that I recall. So Patrick's ability to use the three-leaf clover as an example gives us some freedom and flexibility to say that the things that are native to us, the things around us, might teach us something about God, something that might even be extra-biblical, or something that we wouldn't find directly in the Bible. How do we make those new connections about the mysteries of the Trinity, the compassion of Christ, the movings of the Spirit? I take a lot of joy in children's moments, maybe you've noticed, in trying to find things that are kind of exciting, things that tell the regular stories of the Bible a little slant ways, that there are interesting ways of coming to the truths that we would find in the Bible, but they communicate them in different or enlivening ways. Patrick teaches us to do that. So for all these reasons and more, I hope that in some small way you'll find a little bit of Irish in all of you, whether you're actually Irish or not. Think about St. Patrick and the missionary work that he was able to do. How did Patrick cross cultural boundaries to spread the word of God, to create a culture that was its own, that was creative? Without Patrick, we wouldn't be able to think about the Book of Kells, or the beautiful way that the Bible was illustrated in that way. Ireland served as a a small enclave during the Dark Ages for Christianity. Maybe in some ways it was able to preserve Western literacy, although I don't know if you spoke Gaelic, if that would be so crystal clear to you. That there's lots to celebrate, not just about Irish culture, but about Christian culture that sat just aside from the furthest reaches of Rome, even all the way back in the 400s. It was Ireland and Irish Christians who were able to reintroduce some elements of the faith back into the larger Western culture. So I'm excited about St. Patty's Day. I don't know the plans if the rivers in Chicago are turning green this year, if you have green food coloring for your lightly colored beers, or if you're eating corned beef and cabbage. I have no idea. But my hope is that we could take what's seriously faithful and helpful about the life of that saint, St. Patrick, and consider those and how we might appropriate those for ourselves. My last note before I sign off is that there are many saints, and there are many saints who are not canonized. What I mean by that is perhaps there are people who have been a kind of saint to you, who give you a model for how one might live a loving, compassionate, and faithful life. If you're thinking about St. Patrick's, that is great, but I encourage you to think about the saints that you know living in the flesh. How have they demonstrated Christ to you? What about their lives might you be able to emulate? And do you have the chance to tell people just how much they've meant to you, how they've helped you to grow, and they've helped you to become the person that you are uniquely? Take the time to tell people how much they matter to you. I'm sure that you also matter to others. Being at Woods, one of the best parts is the ways that those of you I know, you've mattered to me. So I thank you for that, especially after last week's musing. Some of you wrote very nice things to me, and I appreciate that. Well, that's about all I've got. I guess I have St. Patty's Day celebrations to get ready for, so I will see you next Monday.